And with that, let's bring in our leadoff panel, Kat Zakrzewski, White House correspondent for The Washington Post, Jake Sherman, MS Now political contributor and co-founder of Punchbowl News, and Mark Leibovich, staff writer for The Atlantic. Jake, you've had quite a 24-hour stretch here. I do want to get to your great interview with the president, but first, let's talk about this huge news overnight that Senator Murkowski is now saying she's a no on Todd Blanche. Now all of this rests with Bill Cassidy. We've seen, this is what I was alluding to before, we've seen this movie when it came to the RFK nomination and confirmation hearings. Where does it look like he's headed right now? What's the math?
Good question, but remember, Bill Cassidy's political career is over because of Donald Trump. Like, plainly, right? Trump endorsed against him, and now he has to suffer the consequence, and that Bill Cassidy owes him nothing, zero. And that's a tough position for the White House to be in here. I don't know where he's going to end up. He's been having endless conversations, and all these holdouts, now two of whom have gone no, Collins and Murkowski, have had kind of endless conversations with Cassidy and with Blanche. I don't know where he's going to end up. But unless Mitch McConnell, who has been out now for a couple months with, I'm not exactly sure how they're classifying it, but had a fall and is not well, unless he somehow comes back, Todd Blanche is done if Bill Cassidy votes no. And he could stay in as acting AG. And I talked to Trump about that. Trump said, he'll be happy to have him as acting, but he should be confirmed. But listen, this is the world that the White House has to live with, because they have antagonized so many Senate Republicans. And when you do so, it's much more difficult to get your agenda through a Senate when people are against you.
Yeah, the fealty starts to dissipate slightly when you target and unseat incumbents in your own party. So you mentioned that Blanche can hang in as acting AG. How long can he do that for? Could it be for the duration of the Trump administration? And then does he have sort of carte blanche to carry out the president's agenda with the DOJ?
Well, those are two questions. I think yes, he could stay as acting for the rest of the administration, because as long as it's a technicality, but as long as his nomination is active, meaning at the end of this Congress, he would probably have to, the president would probably have to resubmit his nomination. But yes, Biden did this with Julie Su, who was the acting labor secretary for quite some time. The question about whether he has any diminished authority as acting AG is not something that's really been tested. From a precedential level, meaning the precedent that it's set, it's not great. But I do think that he could carry out, from what I've been told, he could carry out all the duties of the attorney general while being acting AG.
Tell us more about your interview with the president, Jake.
Yeah, it was fascinating. We talked to him about Congress, which is what we cover, and an institution that he has a complicated relationship with. And I thought one of the clips that you played was very interesting, because he doesn't really have any grip, or he's confused, and it is a confusing topic about why presidents always lose in the midterm election. I explained to him that I think it's because people want to check on power, and Trump thinks that he's done so well that that no one should want to check on his power. And he said also, on top of that, he can't guarantee that Republicans will come out, the Republicans that voted for him, the voters that put him in the White House twice now, will come out and support congressional Republicans for, House and Senate seats. And that is a very fascinating insight into his thinking at this moment in time, as we sit, as you said, 88 days before the midterm elections.
Yeah, it's a bleak assessment, like I said at the top there, for a man who's generally pretty confident, even if it's smoke and mirrors. Mark, Senator Tillis and Cornyn bent themselves into a proverbial pretzel to send Blanche's nomination out of the committee. Now you see a rebuke. It was not just Susan Collins. Now it's Murkowski. And you may see Cassidy, based on what Jake was just illuminating, the fact that he was unseated by a Trump-backed candidate. So what does all of this say about the president's leverage on Capitol Hill?
Well, I mean, it says a few things. I mean, first of all, I mean, yes, I mean, this is the YOLO caucus, meaning, they don't have anything to really, think about reelection wise, because Trump has already, in his own way, kind of undermined all of them. But as we've learned from John Cornyn and Tom Tillis, there are ways to get these folks on the team and get them back on board. I mean, in some ways, Murkowski and Collins were certainly, there's nothing safe about them, but I think Democrats would have probably pointed to them as being the two most likely no votes. And then it all comes down to Cassidy, unless, as Jake mentioned, McConnell somehow becomes ambulatory enough to come to the floor and vote for Blanche. But, it's unclear what McConnell would even do if he got that far. Either way, I mean, Cassidy is a wild card. There are two ways of looking at this. One, he owes the president nothing, as you mentioned. But on the other hand, I mean, do you really want to ride into retirement with this whole load of hassle on the way out and just getting hated left and right? There is do I really need this headache, mindset that I think can set in also. So it'll be fascinating. We'll see what happens. And I also think, by the way,
indeed.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was just going to say.
No, go ahead.
No, the idea of whether, he can sort of not be confirmed and serve anyway is kind of another wild card here. It does seem like he can get a lot done and do a lot of bidding for the president if he stays on for a long time, whether he's confirmed or not.
That really is an interesting dynamic we need to keep a close eye on. How long can he just be acting and carry out the president's agenda? Kat, Trump is adamant about pushing through his legislative agenda before Congress goes on its very long recess in August. He told Jake that he likes John Thune, and he's not looking to push him out. But what happens if Thune falls short?
Certainly, we've seen the president willing to go on the attack when he feels that he does not have the support of his allies. And we've seen just over the last few weeks, he's put pressure on Thune in public remarks, telling his constituents to call the senator. And so there is a lot of pressure on Thune today as Trump tells him he needs to bring this to the floor, even though it doesn't seem like the votes are there. And it just speaks to this bigger challenge, I think, for Republicans in Congress, where Trump really is trying to cast a lot of blame on them in this midterm cycle. One of the most fascinating parts of Jake's interview to me was when the president talked about how voters are angry with Republicans, but not him.
Yeah, so Kat, they may be mad at Republicans and not him, but that is certainly not what is bearing out in the polling that we're looking at. Trump's polling numbers from several different polls in the last few weeks have shown him at record lows against himself in his first term and now record lows in the second term. How does all of that factor into the treatment that he's going to get on the Hill? Are Republicans slowly and belatedly untethering themselves from the president?
It seems like as we get closer to the general elections in this midterm cycle, they're going to have to do that if you look at the polling. Just this morning, we got job numbers that are bad for the White House. You see what's going on with persistently sticky high gas prices. And as you get to this new phase of the election, there's going to have to be an attempt from Republicans to create some distance between themselves and these policies.
Jake, it's been a very tumultuous 24 hours for President Trump, having nothing to do with your interview. A candidate that he endorsed, Andy Ogles, lost his primary in Tennessee. Ogles has been one of the president's, let's just say, staunchest or most loyal soldiers. What does that signal? Is his grip on the party slipping, or is this just a one-off example?
Well, we'd also be remiss not to mention that one of his endorsed candidates in Michigan lost to somebody who had stopped campaigning months before and wasn't even effectively in the race, and was writing handwritten notes to the FEC saying, I'm not going to be running anymore, because he couldn't find out how to log on to the FEC system. So really quite the string there of political events for the president. That said, listen, I mean, the president likes to say he has a 99% or something like that track record in endorsing people. It's not that high. I mean, he endorses a lot of people who don't even have races. But I mean, still, he has an incredible grip on the party. Is it loosening? Yes, it probably is. It probably is. I mean, Andy Ogles was a loyal foot soldier for President Trump and against it many times the House Republican leadership, member of the Freedom Caucus, and lost quite resoundingly. But still, the vast majority of people who are endorsed by Trump, who get Trump's endorsement, do win their primaries.
Mark, while voters have made it very clear that their big issue here in this election is the economy, the cost of living, Trump is still focused, as we mentioned off the top, on birthright citizenship, voting restrictions, and here we go again with vaccines. How will all of that go over with his base? But more importantly, how will it go over with the coalition that was so critical to getting him elected in 24? Is that coalition disintegrating?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's no indication whatsoever that any of this is a political winner for Republicans. I mean, to say nothing of the ballroom and the reflecting pool and things that he seems to be occupying a great deal of his time with. I mean, this is not something that was a big campaign issue, to say the least, in 2024. Look, I mean, I think to some degree it doesn't matter because Trump's appeal and his hold on the party has been so personal to begin with. I think it gets to sort of a larger existential problem that Republicans are beginning to deal with and are going to have to deal with more and more, which is that when Trump's not on the ballot, their voters haven't turned out. They certainly haven't turned out in midterms. They didn't turn out in 22. They didn't turn out in 18. And that's a big problem for them. And obviously, Trump's not going to be on the ballot in 2028. And they're going to figure out a way to solve that. But there's nothing that indicates that Trump's appeal and his hold on the party is transferable to any one figure, whether it's a down ballot candidate or someone running to replace him.